Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms. I got my co-host here, Dale, at Dynasty_Dale. I'm at TDC_Calvin. And we have now finished all of our rookie rankings. And, that's all fine and dandy and everything, breaking out into tiers. But it's kind of useless until you start to give an actual mock draft, right? So we're going to be breaking down round one of our early rookie mock draft here today. And then tomorrow we're going to be following this up with, some trade targets for some later firsts or any first, really. We're just going to be going through and seeing who would be worth these picks, some of these established vets that always are undervalued, it feels like, in the offseason. And we're going to be talking about who we'd rather have, the rookie or the vet. So once we have our round one done and in the books, we're going to go through round two where it gets a little bit more, a little bit more hairy, whether you'd rather have a rookie versus an established player. But, hopium with these rookies is it can get out of hand. Let's put it that way. So this is going to be all for Superflex today. We'll probably follow up with a single quarterback, mock draft next week. I think that'll be the plan. Again, we'll kind of talk about some of the guys in a one quarterback. That's where it gets a little bit more tricky. We're going to go over some guys that are worth first round picks that are quarterbacks. In most one quarterback leagues, it's tough to get a first rounder for a quarterback at all. So we'll throw some out there for that. But that said, how you doing, Dale?
I'm doing great.
All right. So real quick too, I always forget to do this. So technically this podcast, I am working with the Let's Talk Sports podcast network, and I'm pretty excited because by the time you guys are listening to this, I'll actually have my first episode of my new show that I'm going to be doing strictly with them. So Dynasty After Dark is kind of my baby. It's always going to be mine, but I'm doing a podcast with them, and it's going to be called The Calvin Tim Show. And I told him that is the perfect name for my ego. My ego loves that. So can't feel any more conceited than The Calvin Tim Show, right? So should be a good time. But that one's a little bit less fantasy football specific. It's going to be more sports related in general. So the goal is to get a couple guests out there in the community on every week to just talk through some stuff throughout the offseason. It doesn't necessarily just have to be football. I don't really know many sports other than football. So if we get outside of football, it gets a little risky there. But, I do love MMA. So I might be talking some MMA on there as well. So if you're fans of that, make sure you go check that out as well on the Let's Talk Sports podcast network. So that said, all right, let's get into this. So pretty clearly for me, and you can tell me where you disagree, but the 101 in a super flex mock draft, everybody is going to be telling you to take this player, and I am not going to be taking him number one overall. So number one overall is going to be the quarterback, CJ Stroud.
Oh my!
I think you have to in a super flex mock draft. It's too valuable to go quarterback here, right? And that's
Fair.
where I get the value of Bijan Robinson, but if I'm being real to my tier rankings here, I have CJ Stroud as my number one overall guy. It's super flex. I have to be taking a quarterback here, and I get it. Bijan is probably the safer option, but I love CJ Stroud.
No, I agree with that. I love Stroud as well, but I think it really all depends on what your biggest need is, and personally, I would. If I had the 101 this year, I would try to trade down.
Yeah,
You know, I I
definitely a good
I I
point.
I honestly think that'd be your best bet because I know a lot of people really love Bijan and they're gonna trade a lot for him.
That is true, and I've
So
seen that.
so yes,
I've
yes,
personally seen it, so
yes.
he's not wrong on that. But that said, we're not doing any trades in this one
Right,
because it's kind of hard to
right.
trade with no team need. But I will say the one thing I think is a misconception, right? I don't think you should trade or you should draft for team need in this scenario, right? If you have the 101, even if you have 3 good quarterbacks, like look at our team that Dale and I share a team and it's a higher dollar team and everything. We thought we were solid on quarterback. Then at the end of the season, we lose Kyler Murray. We lose Jimmy Garoppolo. We lose Marcus Mariota. And all of a sudden we're down to Desmond Ridder as our only quarterback that we can start on a week-to-week basis. And we're just like, man, what happened here? We were looking so good and it just fell apart pretty quickly. So,
Yes.
I think for Superflex specifically, you have to go the quarterback, and I get Bijan's value. So if you have the 101 and you know that they want Bijan Robinson, go for the 102 and get a second round pick just added in there. Whatever you can get to trade back one spot and get this quarterback. I just think long term, CJ Stroud is going to be so much more valuable than someone like a Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, no, and to piggyback off that, like a running back's shelf life, in real life football is much shorter than a quarterback. So like you'll have Stroud and potentially Young and the Levises and the Richardsons probably a lot longer than a Robinson.
Yeah, there is the risk that they pull a Zach Wilson, right? But nobody was taking Zach Wilson that high in the rookie class of that draft, right? He, even still, being the number 2 overall pick, he was probably quarterback number 4 drafted by most people in that season. Yeah. So there's a little bit of insulated value there. Even look at Trey Lance. Trey Lance is still worth a first in a super flex for sure. So you have a lot of leeway with these guys versus, Breece Hall, who was pretty good last year, or Javonte Williams, these really hot prospects that got injured. God willing, that doesn't happen to someone like Bijan Robinson, but, it does definitely have a little bit more risk with a running back than a quarterback.
Definitely.
All right, so number 2 overall is going to be Bijan Robinson. We're not going to get crazy here. We're sticking with it here. Bijan Robinson, we just talked about him. He is extremely valuable. I just think that you have to go someone like CJ Stroud because if you go back to the quarterback episode, I was so high on CJ Stroud. I think he's very safe for the actual NFL where, some of the other quarterbacks that we're going to be talking about here, a lot of people are going to be taking Bryce Young number 1 overall, and that's not me. And this is the whole point of this is not what's going to happen, right? Do not take this to your rookie draft and say, oh man, I can't believe Bryce Young went 101 and this guy thinks CJ Stroud. This is what I think you should be doing. So, if Bryce Young goes number 1 and then let's say Anthony Richardson and Bijan Robinson go 2 and 3, and you're getting CJ Stroud at 4, that is a huge value. Again, what do we talk about going for the 101, how expensive that is? You're getting a three pick value right there in your rookie draft. So take this value, this rookie mock draft and compare it against consensus. And that's where you're going to see all the value that we're going to be able to generate here in the future. Thoughts on Bijan?
Its only thought is that he's probably one of the most talented guys in this year's draft, and I think he's going to be a lot of fun for fantasy. But again, like if you could trade him away, I would definitely that's something I would do and try to get a lot of value.
Yep. So top 2 pretty locked in for me right now. Yep. Number 3, you can probably guess because of the Superflex value here. It is actually going to be Anthony Richardson. And, go back to the quarterback rankings. I had Stroud and Richardson in a tier of their own. I don't want to get into it too much here, but I think that the drop-off between Richardson and Stroud is going to be and the next tier of guys is going to be pretty big for fantasy football. These guys are the guys that are true difference makers, in my opinion, at the quarterback position. Anthony Richardson, he's very, very raw using the 103 on him. It does kind of suck, but, if you're going for a Justin Fields or someone like that, Justin Fields was a top 3 pick, and he was pretty raw. What was he, the 4th quarterback drafted that year? So
I will go against that in saying that Justin Fields was more of a complete player than.
Oh, I agree with that. No, I'm not saying. I'm just saying he was still pretty raw in terms of the other guys in that class, and he was still a top 3 pick. You know what I mean? That's all I mean. I agree with you. I like Justin Fields a lot more than Anthony Richardson, but the potential on Richardson is just enormous. So you got to pay up for
Yeah.
it some, right?
Yeah, no, and I see that. Just him being so raw really worries me about
I agree.
spending that high of a pick. I mean,
I
I think
agree.
I would rather have Bryce Young at that point if I were to pick a quarterback. So, I kind of see Richardson maybe going where like Malik Willis was going kind of last year, like in one of the drafts I had. Like I think
I
Willis went 108.
really
So I mean, yeah. So but that was with a more of a quarterback needy team.
sure, sure.
So I mean, I personally see Richardson maybe going mid late compared to early.
Most of the leagues that I was in last year, there was so much hype about Malik Willis going
Yeah.
101, right, and all that jazz. But by the time the actual draft started, Malik Willis was like a early second round pick almost in
Hmm.
all of my rookie drafts last year that were super
Yeah.
flex. I just don't
Yep.
see. I think Richardson is going to test really, really well. Like,
Yes.
I don't think.
Absolutely.
I just think he's going to blow the. There's going to be a lot of hype around this kid as we get closer and
Right.
closer to the actual draft. So, it's going to push his stock up. And again, I have him pretty highly ranked. And again, there's a gap between Bijan and the number 2 running back as well. So it just made sense to put Richardson here based on my ranking. Again, this
Right.
isn't necessarily what's going to happen. If you're getting Richardson at the 108, I'm saying that's a 5-6 pick value right there. So
Yeah.
just something to keep in mind. All right, so the next guy we're going to be going here is going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba, and he's the number 1 wide receiver in this class by far for
Hmm.
me. I think that he's the safest option, and going back over the last couple of years, so many times we let these guys. There was a super flex league that the Kyle Pitts. That was the heavy quarterback draft class, right? There was
Hmm.
Fields, Lawrence, Pitts, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase. It was such a heavy draft class in most of my rookie leagues that year that you were getting Jamar Chase pretty routinely at the 5 or 6 or 7 spot in a
Hmm.
lot of drafts. And I mean, just
Yes.
look at that now. He's the number 1 overall. Well, number 2 probably behind Justin Jefferson. He's kind of solidified that this year, I would say.
Hmm.
But you were getting the number 2 dynasty wide receiver at 6 or 7. I think that's crazy. I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba has the potential to be a top 5 wide receiver. He's just
Yes.
so good. I mean, look at Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's already jumped up into the top 10. Chris Olave's jumped up into the top 10, and he's supposedly better than both of them. So
Hmm.
take for that what you will. What do you think about him at 4? Would you rather take him over some of the guys that we haven't taken?
You're right.
The Bryce Youngs, the
Yeah.
any of the
Jamari
other wide
Gibbs.
receivers, Jamar
Yeah.
Gibbs, some of
Yeah.
those guys.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely take him over any of the wide receivers. I think the only one I would maybe take over him would be Gibbs. Um, but I think that's because uh, of JSN's injury history, like with him having the hamstring. That that those soft tissue injuries do take a lot of time to heal,
Mm-hmm.
which he's had that time. So that's why I think he's probably going to fall a little bit further in rookie drafts than he should because
Yeah,
of
I
that. And
agree.
that's and along with that, like he probably won't uh, do a lot of testing at the combine. Like he probably won't do the 40. He probably like he probably won't do some of those super athletic drills and stuff like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
because of that. So
We'll see. He might be fully
yeah,
healthy at this point and just,
that's true.
didn't want
That's
to
very
risk
true.
anything by coming back. So we'll
Yeah.
see what the combine holds for him. But I agree with you. I
Yeah.
actually think he's going to fall further down boards than he
Yes.
probably should. Again, this is
Yes.
where I would take him. If it was me, I've kind of
Yeah.
flipped my stance over the last couple of years. I used to be so RB heavy, right? Like
Hmm.
RB all the time. And I've gotten burned in quite a few leagues because of how
Yes. Yes.
replaceable running back has
Yes.
become.
Are.
And
Yeah.
it sucks, right? Because those elite guys are still elite. The Christian McCaffreys, those kind of guys. And it's
Hmm.
hard to get one of those guys unless you're investing early, like a Bijan Robinson or a Jameer
Hmm.
Gibbs or somebody like that. But at the same time, so many of these guys just don't pan out. And
Yes.
like the wide receivers, especially when we agree that he's got the potential to be a top 5 guy. It's just so hard for me to justify taking a running back who is volatile, can lose their value so quickly, and also at the same time, these wide receivers are winning you weeks. Like, they are just
Yes.
winning you weeks, and
Yes.
so for me, it's hard to pass that up. And I get it, the positional scarcity. I understand that argument, but you just can't pass up blue chip wide receiver talent, in my opinion. Like, that's just kind of
Yes.
what I've transitioned into. Now, again, we're gonna get into some of the other guys. I have JSN in the same tier as Quentin Johnston, Keyshawn Butte, Jordan Addison, a lot of these other guys, but he's the only one, in my opinion, that is the safest to take this high, that is the
Yes.
safest to be a top 10 dynasty wide receiver after year 1. So I just got to justify taking him this highly compared to some of the other guys.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then one of my leagues, I'm actually at the 104. So I'm hoping that's probably, I mean, I'm probably gonna pick Jackson Smith and Jigba,
Yeah.
honestly. I really like him there. I think he has very good PPR potential. I think he's gonna be better than Garrett Wilson was and Chris Olave were this year. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm I think my biggest thing would be
Can
if
Dak
like
feed him, though?
Bijan,
That's
well, yeah, that's true. That's true. So if Robinson and Jackson Smith and Jigba were there at 104, which one would you take?
Robinson? Who was it?
Robinson.
Bijan?
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Oh, Bijan for sure. And that's
Okay.
where, again, this is kind of how I would draft these guys, the order that I would
Yeah,
draft these
yeah,
guys. So, if Bijan's there, I understand the top 10, everything I just said, I get it, but like, the gap between Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs is just too big, right? You got to take
sure.
Bijan, even if you want to sell him later. Like, his value is going to be he's just going to be valued higher than Smith and
Yeah,
Jigba. You could probably sell Bijan for like Jamar Chase. That's like the kind of
right,
hypes that
right.
you're getting around Bijan. And while I do love Jackson Smith, you're not going to be able to trade Jackson Smith for Jamar Chase straight up, right? So even though they're the same position, you're just not going to be able to do that anytime soon. So there, you got to kind of take the running back, and then in my case, I'd probably just try and look and sell Bijan Robinson for all the assets that I could get, but I would still take him
Right.
over Smith and Jigba. All right, so number 5 here is going to be the other running back that we just talked about. It's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. And again, I like these running backs quite a bit. I like Bijan Robinson, but I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be very good. I just can't justify taking him over these 2 quarterbacks and the wide receiver here that I think has got the safest floor to getting top 10, right? So, again, you got to invest on these running backs early if you want to get a premier talent, but you just got to be willing to bite the bullet if he does burn you long term, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. So yeah, I'm more interested that Bryce Young hasn't gotten off the board yet.
Yeah, and I
I
mean,
and I'm going off of your dislike for him,
I know,
but
I know. This is not going to happen in
no,
actual
so
rookie drafts in
I know
Superflex. I know.
it definitely won't. I mean, I'm not as high on Bryce Young, but I still think he'll be picked before like Anthony Richardson, in my opinion,
Oh,
because of the
probably. I agree with
draft
you. I
value
agree
and
with
stuff
you.
like that.
I understand
So
that. I would just rather have all of these guys over Bryce Young. I just
sure,
don't
yeah,
see,
yeah,
like, all of these guys, I think, are difference makers for fantasy. And we're going to
yes,
get in,
yeah,
you're probably not going to like my where I have Bryce Young, but again, this is I got to be real with my rankings, right? And
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
going to change my rankings just based on public perception, right? So I would rather have all 5 of these guys over Bryce Young, because I think that, look at Zach Wilson today. And I'm not saying Bryce Young's going to be Zach Wilson, but Zach Wilson has all the physical tools. Bryce Young doesn't really have the physical tools. He's been able to overcome those, so it's kind of an opposite side of the coin here. But the whole point is, Zach Wilson has not helped your team for fantasy football, right? And if I don't I would rather have all of these guys, probably. I don't even think you get a first round pick for Zach Wilson anymore, right? So
no.
The thing is, I'd rather have the guy that I think has got the safest floor for helping my team for fantasy football versus the public perception. Like, I don't care if Bryce Young is the 101. He probably will be. We've talked about it in our quarterback breakdowns, but again, I'm just not betting on outliers. He can go and be very mediocre for someone. He can be Kirk Cousins for someone else, right? I just don't want to invest a high first-round pick for a guy that I don't see as having a very high ceiling for fantasy football. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing. Like, he'll probably have a pretty high floor, which is great, but super flex. Are you really going to be able to tell me that he's going to be able to outproduce Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, that's where we're at, right? Or Jared Goff, one of these guys. Like, I just don't see it happening for fantasy. And at that point, are you really going to use a top 5, top 6 pick on Bryce Young if you're not getting better than Jared Goff numbers? It's tough.
Well, I will say that people were really excited about Wilson, but him going to the Jets.
Yeah.
I think it's all of landing spots. So I honestly think Bryce Young is going to go to Houston, and that's going to be the biggest knock on him.
Maybe he goes
being
to Chicago.
Houston.
That'd be the best, and then everyone will hate it.
That would make me. I mean, as long as Justin Fields gets some wide receivers, I'll be happy. I don't care where he goes, and Bryce Young can be part of that poverty franchise. So.
Yeah. All right. So, any thoughts on Jahmyr Gibbs here? Again, would you? Excluding the Bryce Young. So I guess that's the question is, would you rather have someone like Jahmyr Gibbs here or, Quentin Johnston or Michael Mayer? Who would you rather have here? Are you going running back?
I would personally rather have Gibbs because I see him more of like more like an Alvin Kamara. I think it's the biggest thing with Johnston is that he's this freaky athlete, and that worries me sometimes because those freaky athletes don't always translate into the NFL.
Right. And that's kind of the whole point of these guys right here, right? Where Anthony Richardson's probably the only one where he's got a lot of volatility. He could definitely blow up in your face, but other than that, the other 4 guys, I think they have very high ceilings and very high floors, right? So that's kind of the whole point here with the top round picks, right? You're kind of betting on good ceiling with high floor. Anthony Richardson's kind of the ultimate ceiling with no floor, right? So he's the only one up here that I think is kind of a little risky. So that said, the Bryce Young slighting will continue because number 6 is going to be Quentin Johnston. Just talked about him a little bit here. He is a freaky athlete. Again, kind of like Anthony Richardson, he has a lot of potential. He's got DK Metcalf type of potential, but he's got, he's got Corey Davis floor. That's kind of DK Metcalf ceiling, Corey Davis floor. That's kind of what I see for Quentin Johnston, which is scary, right? But, again, I'd rather have that ceiling on my team. Because if he can boom, right, if he goes off and kind of outperforms his draft value, right, let's say he goes at 106 and at the end of the year, he's in that top 10 Dynasty wide receiver category, right, you're getting him at a steal, first off, and I think he helps you a lot better than someone like a Bryce Young, right? So, again, we're kind of talking about this a little bit here, but yeah, that's my thoughts on Quentin Johnston, why I have him so highly ranked here.
No, and for him, I really like him too. I almost want to put him in front of Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's because he's such a freaky athlete, but I don't think he has all the intangibles that like Gibbs or JSN have.
Correct. Yep, I'm with you 100%. With you 100% there. All right, so number 7 here is going to be not the quarterback. It's going to be Michael Mayer. And this, again, for fantasy, tight end sucks, and it really sucks. And you got to spend on the good guys when you can.
Yeah.
And Michael Mayer, tight end premium, let's say this is tight end premium. Where would you
Mhm.
take Michael Mayer in of these players? Do you think 7 feels right for him, or would you rather have him than a
In
Gibbs or a
in tight end premium, I think he's good right where he is at 107.
really? You wouldn't take him
Yes,
higher?
yes,
You'd rather have
yes.
Gibbs and Johnson over Meyer
I
in tight end premium?
it's I it
I would probably move him at least. I could see him swapping Johnston at least a
yeah, yeah,
6, but
I could see maybe 6, but not really any higher than that.
I would probably, to be honest, if it was tight end premium, depending on the value of the tight end premium, if it's 1.5, probably 6 there. But if it's 2, like most of our leagues are, I would say
Yeah,
5 would. I'd rather have him over Gibbs, and just because of how much tight end sucks, right? Where
yeah, yeah,
Jahmyr Gibbs, I
yeah.
think he's going to be really good, but I think that there's going to be a lot of really good running backs in this draft class, and I think that the gap between most tight ends and Michael Mayer is going to be much bigger than the gap between Jahmyr
Bigger,
Gibbs and a
yeah.
lot of the other running backs, right? So tight end premium, heavy tight end premium, I'd still probably take Jackson Smith over him,
Mhm.
but I could definitely see you taking him over Gibbs and Johnson. Lower middle tight end premium, I think maybe over Johnston, and then no tight end premium, probably right here still.
Right, right. I think in most even I would say in most even, like, regular tight end premium, it's the 1.5, 2 point. He's probably still gonna go about 107 because I think somebody's gonna pick Young there.
We
You know, I
we thought that with Pitts though.
I know. I'm just being honest. Well, I think in our league, I think Pitts went like 102, didn't he, or something like that? Yeah,
Yeah, 103, I
yeah,
think. Yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was
It was
crazy, dude.
something like that. But
Yeah,
but I
that
but
just for reference too. So Dale and I share a league, right? We had Travis Kelce, and
Yep.
we won the first year of that league. And it's 2.0 tight end premium. In the offseason, we sell Travis Kelce for a haul, right? Felt good about it at the time. Got the 107 because I was like, this Kyle Pitts kid is going to be pretty good.
Mhm.
I'll probably be able to get Kyle Pitts at the 107.
Yeah.
And that dude's hype train just went so nuclear that he went at the 3 pick. And I was like, dude, we traded Kelce. We didn't get a tight end to replace
Yeah,
him. I
I
was like,
know.
son of a gun, man. Like, it was still a good, fair trade we did. But I was just like, dang it. I wanted Kyle Pitts. But
Yeah,
yeah, it did not work out well for us that year.
definitely did not. So, but I mean, I like Mayer where you have him. So I think he's a very solid player. I think he's going to be. I think he's definitely going to be a top 10 tight end. And I mean, and he's and I mean, like just for like redrafts next year, personally.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in Dynasty, he's probably going to be top 6, 7 players in Dynasty because of his potential.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he's ever gonna. I think Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts are kind of cemented as the 1 and 2 right now
Yes.
for
Yep.
at least until Brock Bowers gets up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it's
Yeah.
going to be an interesting. It's going to be really wild to see how Brock Bowers kind of changes all this. But I think for sure Michael Mayer is going to be a top 5 type of dynasty prospect as soon as he gets
Yep.
drafted in the first round. So it's going to be interesting to watch what happens with him. But yeah, I like Michael Mayer here more than some of the other guys we're going to talk about. But that said, number 8, we're going to go on with the guy that I know you're not in love with, but I love him. I have him ranked higher than Bryce Young. I think Hendon Hooker, I would rather have him over Bryce Young. There's a video that came out actually this week of Hendon Hooker he was at Tennessee in their practice facility actually, still recovering from the injury, right, a little bit, and was on his knees and threw the ball 60 yards through the air on his knees. The dude has a cannon, and he's really good. He's really, really good. So risky. He's definitely going to be like, you're going to get 108 is so much higher than what he's actually going to go in the actual rookie drafts. But this guy has so much potential, like so much potential. And I think he's good enough. If he gets second round draft capital, like let's say he goes to Seattle in the second round. Oh my goodness, this guy is going to be I'm going to be all over Hendon Hooker if that's the case. So Hendon Hooker, I like him more than Bryce Young. What are your thoughts? Let me hear it.
I don't like that at all. I don't. I think that's probably a round and a half too high for Hendon Hooker.
I agree that that's where he's gonna go, but for
Yeah, that's where.
fantasy, I think that this is
But
where
it's yeah.
I'd rather have him.
I don't think he's gonna. I have him going. I have him in my Superflex rankings. I have him at like 19. So that's like that's that's the bottom half of the second round.
That's close to where I have Will Levis.
I mean, I'm trying to be realistic.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like, again, we can be realistic. Like, I can put together a realistic mock, and it'd be Bryce Young, Bijan Robinson, Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, probably Jahmyr Gibbs, Jackson Smith and Jigba, probably Micah Meyer. Then you're probably going, another running back, whichever your flavor is there at 8. I get it, but I just think that Hendon Hooker has more potential than the next player who, and we could talk about it. I'm going to throw him up. So the next player at 109 is going to be Kendre Miller, and he's the running back. I like this guy. Ooh, wrong button here. Let me not be autistic here and get this on. All right, so Kendre Miller, I like this guy a lot. I think the gap between Jahmyr Gibbs and Kendre Miller is pretty small. I think Kendre Miller is extremely explosive. A little bit of an injury risk, right? But he's very, very good. I think that if you can get Hendon Hooker, and again, I understand that he's not going to go 1-8. I get that 100%. But this is mostly about the value that you're going to be able to get for Hendon Hooker. I would be willing to take Hendon Hooker 108. I wouldn't do it because I know I can get him much later. Like, I would be trading back 100% of the time, right? To the 202, 203, somewhere in that range to make sure I got him. I understand that. That's not what I'm saying here with him ranked at the 108. I think that in 2 years, 3 years' time, we can always come back and look at this. But I think that if this kid gets a starting shot at all for a team, I think he's going to prove that he's very, very good and he deserves to be in the NFL. Kind of like a Brock Purdy. Not quite like Brock Purdy, but I think that Hendon Hooker has that potential.
I can see Hendon Hooker going the way of Desmond Ridder. I can see that. But I don't feel the offense.
It depends on where, right?
I just don't feel the offense of Tennessee is very similar to an NFL offense. It's a lot different. He was running more. He was running a lot of no hurry stuff. That is part of the NFL. I get that, but I just think he was. I don't know. I get
it. I understand. But I just think that if everything goes well for Hendon Hooker, I would much rather have him. He's going to be more valuable than Kendre Miller, and I love Kendre Miller. So this is not a knock on Kendre Miller, but it's just saying how much I believe in Hendon Hooker's talent, right? And again, I know you're not going to use the 108 on him. Again, push him to wherever you think he's going to go. Bryce Young, Bryce Young is going to be gone by this point. And notice I don't have him gone yet. But I get it. I think that if everything goes well for Hendon Hooker, he's going to be better. Like, if he even gets a Desmond Ridder type of role, he's going to be better than Bryce Young for fantasy football. He's going to. He's got mobility. He's got a lot more mobility than Bryce Young does. He has a better arm than Bryce Young does. And I think he's a better decision maker than Bryce Young. Bryce Young got to play with some of the best players in the NFL or in the college football with one of the best systems, like just a dominant college system. So I like Hendon Hooker more than these other guys. I think he has more potential. There is more risk, though. He might never be a starter. I understand that completely. And again, that's why you're not taking him with the 108. You're taking him with like the 204, 205. I get it. But I believe in this kid, and I think he's going to prove a lot of people wrong.
I mean, I'm glad you believe in that. I just don't.
Hey, I'm not out here fighting for Stetson Bennett at the 108. Come on, give me a little credit here.
I am so glad you're not, because I would give you so much crap. Like, there wouldn't be enough time in the day for that.
Hey, he barely made round 2, okay? So I'm being realistic here a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, I would take Kendre Miller over Hendon Hooker all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather have him in fantasy because I know Kendra Miller's going to help me now
That is
compared to
true.
Hendon Hooker.
That is true.
It's compared to Hendon Hooker's going to be 2+ years down the road, and
Well,
he's
let's say, okay,
in.
for real quick, and we'll move on here because we spent a lot of
Yes,
time on
yes,
Hendon Hooker.
yes,
But
yes.
real quick, let's just throw a scenario out there. Let's say that Detroit goes Hendon Hooker in the second round. Are you not going to be excited about Hendon Hooker next year? Like, Jared Goff is on his way out. Hendon Hooker comes, gets fully healthy in the NFL, gets to sit for his first year, and gets to learn from Jared Goff, who admittedly is not really that bad of a quarterback. Then maybe they give him a chance next year. Like, there's a lot of situations that there are a lot of quarterbacks that are needed in the NFL right now that I think that he's at least going to get a chance. And there is still the chance that he could be a first-round pick. I know you don't believe that at all, but there is a chance.
No. I do believe there's a chance he can be a pick. I do believe that, but
it's tough. I get it. So, I
can see a first-round pick in Dynasty. I wouldn't waste a first-round pick.
All right, we'll see where. And again, these are early, so this might change. Once we know draft landing spots and all that stuff.
Yes.
But Kendra Miller, again, I like him a lot more. And again, you'll notice he's above some of these other guys, like Bryce Young. But to put everybody's mind to rest, I'm going to take Bryce Young here finally at 10. I still think that the opportunity that's going to be given to him is going to give him a pretty solid floor. I just don't think he has a real ceiling. That's kind of the problem with Bryce Young. I don't want to put a premium pick on him. But, him versus Hendon Hooker, I get it. He's a lot safer than Hendon Hooker, for sure. But I think that if Hendon Hooker makes it at all, he's got much, much better ceiling than Bryce Young. Everyone's going to be touting Bryce Young. He's going to be a top 3 pick in super flex drafts. I understand that, and it's a bad pick. It's going to be a bad pick. He has no mobility whatsoever. And again, go back to the quarterback like tier breakdown. He has no mobility. He doesn't have a great arm, and he's profited from one of the best systems. And I think he's good, but he's also 5'10" and 190 pounds. He's so small. It's just not going to work out well in the NFL compared to college. You can get away with that in college, and I understand that, but it's just not going to last in the NFL. So Bryce Young at 10. I'd rather have Kendra Miller over Bryce Young. Again, I think Kendra Miller has a higher ceiling. There is a little bit of a lower floor with him versus Young because of the whole injury risk that Kendra Miller does kind of possess. But, I just want that ceiling with one of these more premium picks.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I'm more surprised that you have Miller over like Jordan Addison or Boutte.
Well,
I mean, because like in these spots in your rookie draft, like that's typically where these guys go. It's comparatively. So I mean, I can honestly see like Addison being like the next a Devonta Smith personally because size.
it's possible.
And
so
yeah, but
I just threw up the last 2 picks, and we can talk about Young we can talk about these last 4 picks kind of as a package, right? So Kendra Miller at 9, Bryce Young at 10, Kayshon Boutte at 11, and then Zach Charbonnet at 12. And you're going to say, what? Where is Jordan Addison? Well, you're just going to have to tune into the next episode of round 2 because he's not here. You won't have to wait long. He's very, very high in round 2. I'll just put it that way. I'll tease it out a little bit there. But I think that when you're looking at these guys, so in our ranking show, I had Zach Charbonnet above Kendra Miller. Since then, I've kind of looked at it a little bit more. I like the ceiling of Miller more than Charbonnet. Charbonnet, I think, has a very high ceiling. I think he's going to be a very good NFL player, but I think he has a really safe floor. Again, with one of the premium picks, I'm looking a little bit more for ceiling than I am for floor, right? Most of these guys in the top 10, really, top 12, that they have a higher ceiling than they do a floor. 10 through 12, that's where it gets to be, they get to be a little bit safer, but they're not necessarily the game breakers, right? So I'm willing to take a little bit more risk with my top rookie picks, and that's why I'd rather have Kendra Miller than Zach Charbonnet. I'd rather have Kendra Miller over Boutte. I'd rather have him over Young. Now, again, super flex value Young over Boutte and Charbonnet, it just makes sense. Again, even an average Bryce Young is going to be better than these other guys. I think that Kendre Miller has the potential to be an elite running back, like a top 10 guy who, top 10 running backs, if they can continuously hit, are going to outproduce like the average, Derek Carrs or some of those guys for fantasy football, right? So you'd rather have those guys on your team. And I get it, there's the super flex value to it, but if I'm drafting, I'd rather have that, right? Where Bryce Young, he's definitely going to be safer than Boutte or Charbonnet. He's going to average more points than those two for sure throughout his career. So Boutte at 11, you can tell me what your thoughts are here versus Addison, but I did have him ranked higher in our ranking show. I think that he's got a little bit safer potential than someone like Jordan Addison. Again, he's more of a prototypical kind of wide receiver, but he does have the off the field stuff. So, there's a little bit of that, but I think I think Boutte has a potential to not be a top 10 guy, but like a top 15 dynasty wide receiver, maybe the mid 15 to 18, which means you're getting wide receiver 2 upside, which is good. Not everybody can be a top 12 wide receiver, right?
Yeah.
And then Charbonnet, again, I would rather have Boutte for one of those more elite wide receivers than the running back. But Charbonnet, I think that he's going to be like the next David Montgomery. He's just going to be the solid. Nobody's going to love him, but people are going to respect him after a couple of years. All right, now break down your thoughts on the last 4 picks.
All right. I think Miller's too high. Obviously, Young's too low. But for Kayshon Boutte, I think he's just right at that 111 spot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very fair for him. I have him a little bit higher in my rankings, but that's because I had Michael Mayer a little bit lower than you do. But I really like Kayshon Boutte. I think he's going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might edge Addison because of the potential, and we've seen that size of wide receiver can work in the right system. And he doesn't have as much off the field stuff. Zach Charbonnet worries me because he had a lot of work in college. Like he had 566 carries in college, which in the NFL that's about 2 years worth.
Mm-hmm.
It is, but I just I see it, but also he played in an offense that was more wide open. It's a Chip Kelly offense. So I view Chip Kelly running backs a lot differently. and they don't always translate as well to the NFL because of because of the offense they play in.
Right.
So I do like Charbonnet, but I think he's more of a beginning of the second round player for me. It's because of those. I think I would rather have like the Zach Evans
this is where it gets a little bit more nitpicky.
Like yeah.
Right. And once we get down to it, you're not going to love my Zach Evans rankings, but I think we disagreed pretty heavily on him in the breakdowns and everything. But, I think the funny thing is the sleeper ADP already has Zach Charbonnet above guys like Sean Tucker and Zach Evans. And I actually think that's going to be pretty realistic. I will say I believe once it comes down to it that Jordan Addison will probably be where Boutte is at the 111. Like most people are probably going to take, you take Hendon Hooker out of here. That creates another spot in the first round, right? I believe all of these guys, except for Hendon Hooker, are going to be first rounders. Maybe Kendre Miller falls out. It all depends on personal rankings for the running backs, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to really like Zach Evans. A lot of people are going to really like Sean Tucker. But I believe for the most part, you're looking at all the wide receivers we have listed here. Boutte is probably the only one that might go in the second. Jordan Addison would be the replacement for him. Hendon Hooker's not going to go here. It's going to be another running back. But, Kendre Miller, Zach Charbonnet, one of those two probably falls to the second round, and they're replaced by Sean Tucker or Zach Evans. But for the most part, this is a pretty realistic top. And probably the only other guy is going to be Will Levis. You probably replace Hendon Hooker with Will Levis. That's the one guy we're both not really fans of.
No.
That is going to be hyped up like crazy in the first round. So, these are early rankings. I understand that completely. Again, Hendon Hooker, people are going to be, I can't believe you're taking Hendon Hooker in the first round over, and I'm not taking him in the first round. I would rather have him over Will Levis, who is going to go in the first round. Will Levis is probably going to go 108 in most drafts, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Probably going to be Will Levis there versus Hendon Hooker, which just means you're getting a massive value. If you get Hendon Hooker with the 2.4, and I think that he should be the 1.8, that's just value, right? That's all it is. And again, once the consensus starts to get out there, which we're probably only a couple months away from a consensus forming, you'll be able to go back and look at this and kind of see, again, CJ Stroud's probably going to be 104 on average, which is a gap there. Jahmyr Gibbs is probably going to be 104, 103, somewhere in that range.
Right.
Smith, JSN, he's probably going to be 6 or 7. Quentin Johnston is probably going to be 7 or 8. So there's going to be value there, but I think that, what that's telling you is if you have the 101 and you're not going to take Bijan, or let's say you have the 102 and Bijan's already off the board. You want CJ Stroud. Bryce Young is the consensus 102. He already is. I understand that. Mm-hmm. But if you want CJ Stroud over Bryce Young, maybe you can trade back to the 104 and just pick up, the 202, 203, something like that, just to move back 2 spots to get CJ Stroud, who I think is better than Bijan. Like, I'd rather have him than Bijan, right? So that's what the whole purpose of this is not to tell you how the first round's going to go. It's to help you identify the value in your drafts, right? So, again, these are early. Hendon Hooker ultimately will probably move to the 202 or something like that by the time it gets there. But as of right now, based on my rankings, until proven otherwise, until Hendon Hooker is not a first-round NFL draft pick, I am going to be singing this dude's praises all offseason. 60 yards from his knees, Dale. From his knees.
Well, I'm more worried about his knee because he tore his ACL in November.
Dude, those are like the most routine recoveries ever.
I know, I understand that,
especially for quarterbacks.
Yeah, I get that, but like that still takes time out of your preparation and training.
But that's actually good though. That's the one thing I will say I think is actually better for him because so many of these guys come to the NFL nowadays, and we'll wrap it up here, but so many of these guys, these quarterbacks, come to the NFL and they have to start right away. Like, are you telling me Zach Wilson wouldn't have been better if he hadn't been named the starter in training camp? Like, just let him go and sit. And I think that's why a lot of Jets fans are actually really excited about the Aaron Rodgers rumors, right? Because they want to get Aaron Rodgers on the team. They can let Zach Wilson sit behind him for a year, learn from Aaron Rodgers, which would be good for Zach Wilson. I don't think it's going to happen, but if it did, that'd be good for Zach Wilson because he can learn from someone like Aaron Rodgers instead of being forced to be the starter from day one. Like, it's just so many of these guys, like Will Levis is probably going to be a starter from day one, and it's not going to be good for him. So I think someone like Hendon Hooker, he's probably going to be an early second-round pick, if I had to guess, and he's probably going to go to someone who's QB needy, like Seattle or, someone like Detroit, somebody that needs a quarterback on the cheap. Let's say the Ravens franchise tag Lamar Jackson and then take Hendon Hooker in the second round. It's interesting, you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting, at least. So then next year you move on from Lamar Jackson, you trade him, whatever it is, and you got a camp battle of who's the backup there? I can see Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley and Hendon Hooker for the starter role. Crazier things have happened. That's all I'm saying. So we can knock it all we want, but I think that Hendon Hooker is very talented. That's kind of the whole point of this rant, I guess. But So we'll see. He ultimately, again, he's probably going to go like 2.9. You're going to get like a whole round value on him than what I think he's worth.
I do agree with that, and I think I think like late second round, he's perfect.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm going to have him in probably every league.
Yeah,
I'm going to have him in like every league because of that point. But we'll see. We will see. So let us know your thoughts on the first round. Again, next episode you're going to be listening to is going to be the draft picks. Who would we rather have, Kirk Cousins or Bryce Young, right? So we'll do some of those and kind of go through a lot of these picks, kind of see where the value on these lie, especially once you put a name to it. That really changes things from, what would you spend for the 101? I don't really know. What would you spend for CJ Stroud? That's where it kind of changes it. And again, if CJ Stroud's actually going at 104, you don't have to spend 101 money on CJ Stroud. That's kind of the whole point. So that's our thoughts on these guys. Again, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Dynasty_Dale, at TDC_Calvin. Go check out my podcast on Let's Talk Sports, the YouTube channel. Great group of guys over there, kind of a bunch of ne'er-do-wells. We're not the most professional group of guys, but I think it's a lot of people who really love to talk sports, and that's kind of the whole point of it. So make sure you go check that podcast out. Give us some love. Hit us up on socials. Leave a comment, leave a like, leave a review, subscribe to the channel, whatever it is that makes you happy. Don't really care. Just help us out here wherever you can. And we love to hear from you guys as well. So thank you guys for listening. We're going to be continuing to pump out content all offseason. I actually got asked. Someone told me the other day, the fantasy season's over, so what is there to talk about for fantasy? I said, dude, we're dynasty focused over here, man. There is no offseason. Yeah. There is no offseason. So make sure you're staying tuned all offseason. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good night.